Well, we had so much fun the first time around that Mr. Gregg Masterson is back. We're going to talk about some of the things we missed last time out, going 42 minutes, talking about backup catchers. And who knows, we'll talk about a few other things. I want to know what's the craziest thing he's going to do this offseason if he's in charge of the Twins. So let's hang out. This is Locked On Twins.
You are Locked On Twins, your daily Minnesota Twins podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's happening? It's Locked On Twins yet again. I'm your host, Brandon Warren. You can unfollow me on the tweets at Brandon_WARNE. Follow me over at the Skeets at Warren.bsky.social, not dat. Wow, that was a weird slip. Thank you, though, for making Locked On Twins your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. And, of course, as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, we're your team every day. Love to hear from you in the comments. Make sure you are hanging out with us in the premieres. And if you can't and you watch after the fact, we love that too. Just hit thumbs up, hit subscribe. And, yeah, it should be a good time. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win said $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. After a 20-some hour hiatus, Mr. Gregg Masterson at Gregg T. Masterson on the tweets and the Skeets is back. How are we today?
I just got a new wedding ring. My original wedding ring fell on the bathroom floor and broke. So if you're looking for a wedding ring, don't get tungsten carbonide if you have a tendency to drop it. That's a word to the wise, I guess.
I bet you probably are one of those, I don't want to say freaks, but like you have probably a ginormous ring size. Because people would always be like, hey, look, check out my ring. And I would like try it on and it would never fit. Come to find out when I got married, yes, believe it or not, you can see on my hand, I am married. I had just like an obscenely large ring finger, which is not me trying to like flex on anybody. But I suspect you probably are of a similar ilk.
I don't know what an extremely large is. The one I just got is a 12. I don't know if that's large or small or what.
Mine's a 14. So,
well, yeah, I one of my parents has long we and I actually inherited that. So
yeah, well, likely excuse, but we always start off with fun stuff, whether it's wedding rings or shipping packages, you name it. We're off and running with it, but glad to have you back. We didn't get to a lot of the stuff we were hoping to, and who knows, we'll see what happens, what way the wind blows today, which if you're in Minnesota, and I know you're not, it's been crazy windy here today. Like I thought my dog was going to blow away. 30 mile an hour winds, and he's not that heavy. So could have been a tragic day. But also in the winds, and we were talking about trades and all that. We're going to talk about the craziest off-season move that Mr. Masterson or I would be okay with making. And part of this is stemmed from reading Aaron Gleeman's mailbag this morning, where it was like, people are asking if Christian Walker makes sense for the Twins if they cut enough existing salary. And Gleeman's like, man, people are going to be pretty disappointed if that's the price range they think the Twins are, suggesting the Twins are going to, shop in that price range at all, no matter who they move. Probably just not going to happen. And so personally, my opinion, Greg, and if you differ, I want to hear, is that anything that they do that's going to be of massive significance is going to be a trade.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Or at least predicated by a trade, I would say, unless they move, 3 guys maybe and clear up 15 million. You might see like a sizable free agent signing.
Yep.
Though you've got the multi-year stuff. But yeah, if there's something sizable, I would say that's going to be in a trade.
How does that make you feel given Falvey's record? I mean, great trade Falvey is a running joke, but there have been good trades, there have been bad trades. It's certainly not as bad as some might have you think, because there are also people who are, wringing their hands over how good Chase Petty's going to be, even though Sonny Gray gave you 2 very nice years as a starter, hugely valuable, great seasons, and Chase Petty hasn't even made the major leagues yet. Does adding through trades make you more or less optimistic going forward this offseason?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that Derek Falvey has like an A+ record in trades. If you've ever followed my writing over at Twins Daily, I actually have a spreadsheet of every single trade that Derek Falvey has ever made that I update a few times a year. And then I kind of put up kind of a description like, okay, here are all of the challenge trades that he's ever made. Here are all of the buys. I think that the trade deadline of 2022, kind of has an outsized imprint on people's minds. Those were flops of trades. Absolutely. I still don't think that I like in the moment, I didn't hate them. They just didn't turn out awesome.
Yeah. Yep.
He's made some really nice offseason trades. You've brought up Sonny Gray. Jake Odorizzi is probably the best trade that he ever made.
Especially because they laundered Jermaine Palacios out of the deal.
Yeah. I mean, the Josh Donaldson trade was really good. The Arise for Lopez was solid. The Kenta Maeda deal, that was
people hated that one.
Yeah, but at the same time,
we may have lost our friend Greg for a brief minute here. I don't think he muted himself. Greg, are you there?
Oh dear. Okay. Hey, are we back?
Hey, yes. And I'm going to leave this in.
Sorry, I completely lost internet. That's always awesome in the middle of a podcast. What was the last thing I said?
It's your fault for living in Baja California with Jesse Ventura. No, we were talking about their record and laundering Jermaine Palacios, my phrase, not yours. And I have a theory though. Like, how everybody fantasizes about, the Rays trades are so good. I think that the Rays trades and Falvey's trades are about the same. You just have one that has an overwhelmingly positive vibe and one that has an overwhelmingly negative vibe. If you could remove all bias, you'd probably say, Derek Falvey does about as good on trades as any Rays GM has, even though everyone thinks the Rays have been just fleecing people for 15 years.
Well, yeah, and I mean, the whole Rays deal is sort of just a running narrative at the same time where because that is how they do business and they've been successful.
Even if trades, though, you're going to luck into some good ones, right?
Of course. Yeah. And that's part of the thing is like, you're going to luck into some trades. They've also just been good with trades. But if your whole identity is we make a ton of trades, we don't pay anybody, and you've been successful over time, by definition, you're going to get a great reputation for making trades. I think that there's definitely some aspect to that, but at the same time, they've also been good. Derek Falvey, I think, I think that if they didn't have the blow up in 2022 at the deadline, I don't think that he would have a negative kind of connotation with his trades. Beyond those trades, like there have been some real clunkers like the Lamont Wade deal and the Luis Heel deal, but that's going to happen. But yeah, I think that the narrative kind of started in 2022 that you just had 2 huge clunkers of trades, and it's a little bit hard to shake that stench off. And I'm not saying that he's great. I don't think that he's the best GM with trades in the league, but I do think that there is a little bit of that narrative that kind of will travel with him for quite a while now.
And the narratives are shaped by other moves too, even though you're not talking about specifically trades, signing Logan Morrison, signing Lance Lynn, even to some extent Marwin Gonzalez. I mean, that doesn't reflect well, although, it's not like you're making 4 or 5 year commitments to these guys. Whereas with the Rays, they're resurrecting guys who are 29 and are on their 3rd organization. They're making like mini Jose Bautistas out of a bunch of players. And so I think that, again, their player development and the way their roster looks different but still good plays into that stereotype a little like subconsciously. Like it's not just trades, but they also make shrewd free agent signings and find ways for guys to get that little added oomph before they end up signing with the Angels and invariably, ending their career at that point. You brought up the heel deal, which is a fun little turn of phrase. Jake Cave signed with the Doosan Bears of the KBO for $1 million next year. So congrats to him. And Luis Diaz, one of the most impressive physical prospects I saw firsthand, has re-signed with the Samsung Lions of the KBO. He slashed 348, 419, 610 out there last year. So easy to see why he might want another go-round before coming back stateside. I saw him in 2019 spring training. I was at Bradenton, Pirates Town or Pirates, whatever they call it. And so I got to be on the field during their infield practice. And it's incredible how quickly the ball goes outfielder, cutoff man, base. It will shock people to see it at that level. But Luis Diaz just physically just stood out to me. And I don't know why. I don't know why I'm still thinking about it 5 years later. I hope that doesn't get put me on some sort of weirdo list. But I'm a Luis Diaz guy.
I mean, I'm on record being a guy who loves big dudes who ding dongs. There aren't enough. I mean, actually, I was also a first baseman like you were in our young careers. I am a big fan of gigantic first basemen, and there just aren't enough of those anymore these days. So even if they're not, MLB talents, I get really excited about someone like dadgummit, Diaz.
I like gigantic outfielders who are lying about being first baseman, like Ryan Klesko or like Adam Dunn or
Yep.
I mean, I don't know why Ryan Klesko came to mind so quickly. That was the first name in my brain was Ryan Klesko. It's like a Not Gaetti tweet or something.
I was about to say the exact same thing.
Yeah, I've joked with him about starting a podcast called Remembering Some Guys and just pulling out a chunk of baseball cards like this here and just thumbing through and telling stories. And I had a couple episodes of that 90s baseball pod with Greg Olson, a recent guest of this show, where we did that. We pulled out cards and I'd be like, oh, Don Slott. And he'd be like, oh yeah, we played in the Arizona Fall League together in 1991. He'd have some kind of story because he played long enough and he played in the interleague era towards the end of his career. He played a long time in the AL, a little bit in the NL, and then ended in the NL. That was actually some pretty fun, whimsical content that I'd like to go back to that again.
That is, I mean, and the pool of major leaguers and even, just minor leaguers is a lot smaller than we tend to imagine. Mm-hmm. I mean, it is a very small world. If you play for a long time, you've probably run across in some regard, 50% of the players who were active during that stretch.
Yeah. Especially if you hear a guy say, I once spent a week in Sarasota one night, all those small towns, they cross paths so much in the low minors and rehab stints and the Arizona Fall League, winter ball. Yeah. There's a lot of connective tissue there with a lot of players. Well, let's do this. Let's take it's actually our only national break. We'll have a couple spots later in the show, but we'll take a break. And when we come back, we're going to really dive in headlong into the deep end of the pool, not the shallow end, because that'd be bad, on the craziest move we'd be okay with making if we were in charge of the Twins or if someone had to justify the move to us. How does that sound, Greg?
Perfect.
I was like, uh-oh, we lost him again. All right, quick word, and we'll be right back. Well, we got to show some love for our friends over at FanDuel. You can get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if that $5 bet hits. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page you place your bets. It's like having the red zone in your back pocket. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Again, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet hits. You got to check it out, FanDuel.com. That FanDuel app. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, we are ready to rip, roaring, run into segment 2. We're talking about the craziest move we'd be okay with the Twins making this offseason with Gregg Masterson, special guest of the show. And first of all, it's so great you've been able to be on here a couple days in a row. Filling in for Dave is some pretty big shoes to fill, and I appreciate that you've listened before, so you understand the gravity of that importance that the shoes that you're wearing today.
Does Dave have big feet? Is that a running bit on the show?
No, this is not a running bit.
Because mine are 14s.
Oh, see, I'm 12, and so maybe we just flip flop rings and
yeah,
it's fun, fun fact. Let me tell you. So we've kind of laid down the groundwork that it's going to be a trade if the Twins do anything big this offseason. Now, when I break down what I'm okay with, that is separate of whatever it's going to take to make space for this trade to happen. If you are absorbing, now this hypothetically, a $15 million player, we'll assume that the Twins will have made enough moves on the other end to make it work. Okay. So it's not like it's one thing I don't like about off-season exercises is that you really have to have a lot of contingencies, or people can be kind of beholden to the like the Twins daily spreadsheet. Like, yes, I understand you've got to work within 130, 135 or whatever it is, but if you miss like even just one move, it completely makes your blueprint null and void. And again, they're null and void anyway by definition. But again, like, they're just fun exercises, but it's hard to be accurate because there's a lot of stuff we don't know behind the scenes. So
I don't know how fun it was. I actually did a write-up on one. We did a series of 4 of them. Like, here's what I do. And I swear that was the most exhausting experience of my life, trying to make that blueprint and the payroll work. So yeah, I totally get it.
Yeah, definitely. It's an exhausting experience. And I once co-hosted a podcast with Jeff Dubé. So I know exhausting experiences. Okay, so when I say I'm going to keep it kind of general, like I'm pushing all my prospect chips in with the exception, and if this is a cop-out, tell me, because I don't want to be one of those prospect huggers, but I'm not trading Walker Jenkins and I'm not trading Emmanuel Rodriguez. Now, what does that mean for guys who have debuted? Brooks Lee, for instance? I don't know. I fully accept the idea that they have too many infielders and may need to trade one or some. Dave has been of the mind that they could trade Jose Miranda. I think the time is wrong for that. I think if he's going to hit 280 with 40 doubles next year, you'd rather it be with you, because what you're getting back now would not be good. It's not David Ortiz fatigue, but it's still concerned that a guy's going to blow up away from you. But I fully agree that there's probably some prospects who are already making their debuts who should be part of this. But I really don't want to move Jenkins, and I don't want to move Emmanuel Rodriguez. Have I already painted myself into too deep of a corner for what kind of player I hope to acquire, do you think?
No, I don't think so. I mean, obviously, unless you're saying like Mike Trout or something like that. I mean, I'm also I'm of the same mind that I'm at this point pretty okay as long as the return is good. Basically anything up to Rodriguez, and I could honestly be talked into Rodriguez for the right piece. I just don't know what that piece is. So no, I don't think that you've painted yourself into a corner.
If you had to move one or the other, though, it's Erod.
I think so. The profile just, I don't know what to make of it.
I adore the profile, but I also am like, 15 years ago, Aaron Hicks had a similar profile,
Walk numbers are really difficult to to carry over into the majors. Obviously, we have a lot more data than we did in Aaron Hicks's time, but I don't know, man.
Are you saying Aaron Hicks's time is over?
In Aaron Hicks as a prospect, time is over.
Okay. Anyway, sorry, I waylaid you.
No, I don't know. Like And I feel like I'm almost lower on Walker Jenkins than most people as well, just because I don't see him like, I don't have like a schema in my head for him quite yet. But no, Erod, I think I would be more willing to move, because I do think that there is a wider distribution of what he could be, and it's totally possible. I think that, I mean, and it might just be Edward Julian fatigue, but I get a little bit nervous when a guy might be a little bit too passive. And when you have the power ability that Rodriguez has, and you're in the minor leagues, people are just going to pitch around you. Obviously, he has an amazing eye, but he also might be a little bit too passive and be getting away with things that he won't be able to in the majors. So that's kind of my thing.
Well, and it's strange too, because like Julian has a good enough bat that you need to respect it. It's just, for whatever reason, he glitched out for the better part of a year. I mean, and if you go into his splits, I don't know if you've done this, it's terrifying. Like he slugged I think it was like 444 against fastballs, and then against every other pitch, it was like 182 or something, or 102. It was something like egregious, where it's like, there is no reason to ever throw this guy a fastball. And I feel like every single time he saw a fastball down the stretch, it was a pipe job where he was looking for, on a 2-2, 3-2, he's looking for a changeup, a curveball, something that moves, and a fastball just locks him up. And so that's why I think he just needed a reset, like give him an off season and then say, listen, do what you got to do. We're not going to mess with you too much. But like it legit felt like his controller disconnected in like 40% of his plate appearances last year.
Yeah, it's baffling. And I get that it
shows how hard the game is, though. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
how he was that first month, and then the rest of the year. Baseball is hard, man.
It is. And yeah, and when you have kind of a reputation for being a very patient hitter, it's something that teams can potentially take advantage of. It's like, it could just be a normal sophomore slump. The league adjusts, and then you have to adjust yourself, become a little bit less selective or whatever. But yeah, I mean, the numbers bear it out, because his batting average against off-speed pitches, that's factoring in all of the called third strikes right down the middle, and so, what he was able to do in his first go around possibly isn't something that he's able to do anymore. And so it's like, circling back to Erod, we could be running into a very similar thing where major league pitching can attack him in a way that minor league pitching can't. And yeah, so I guess that's my take on it.
So my line now. What is your line for player movement and the craziest thing you'd be okay with? Because basically my thought exercise is this. Like, crazy could mean you would give Paul Goldschmidt 3 years and $60 million. Like that's crazy.
That is crazy, yes.
Crazy could mean you go give Max Fried $175 million, not quite as much as Blake Snell, and then you rework your budget behind that. Like there are certain crazy things that are just not on the radar. So my crazy thing was Luke Keeschel, you can have him. Marco Araya, you can have him. Because not that I think the Twins are getting to this point, but when the Twins were looking to move Brian Dozier back in the day, the Dodgers had so much prospect depth, it was coming out of their ears. And like, you get to a point where you can only protect so many guys on your 40, and you've got Rule 5 guys who are eligible. You've got guys who are going to be minor league free agency eligible. And you also have a good big league team to where you're not really bringing up that number 12 prospect who can play second base and third base exclusively. Like, you've got different gadget players who can do some things, but like Edwin Rios just falls out of your organization. That's a bad example, but the Twins are not quite there yet, but they have an incredible number of infield types in their infield-ish. I mean, I don't know what you'd call Keeschel right now. Don't know what you'd call Julien right now. So they'd have to sort out the log jam there. But I think in their upper minors, they have enough good prospects to where it's like, okay, start pairing off some of that depth, even after you got burnt by the Tyler Mahle trade and the Jorge Lopez trade. It's still time to do more of that.
And if you if you look at the pitching that they have right now, they have more starters at AAA right now than they have rotation spots. And we're not talking about like factoring Randy Dobnak.
No,
They
it's
have
AAA with guys who might be on the shuttle besides.
yes. So it is, I think, time to move off of some of your high minors starting pitching prospects. You've got a bunch of guys who are like in the Twins top 20. And I would be willing to scale that ladder very quickly for like a bigger bat, or some corner outfielder, first baseman, DH type that can kind of be a consistent bat in this lineup. Make me feel a lot better. The craziest thing I think I would do beyond just like not completely sending all of their high minors pitching prospects out to sea, but the crazy thing that I'm thinking about is I would be open to moving Yohan Duran, as long as Griffin Jacks stays in the bullpen. If they go through with a move that moves Griffin Jacks into the starting rotation, I'd be a little bit hesitant to move Duran in that case. Mm-hmm. But Duran has been a great pitcher. He's been a great reliever. He's still one of the best relievers in baseball, but I'm getting a little bit nervous about him. I mean, obviously I don't have information that major league teams don't in terms of like his velocity falling off a little bit over the past few years, but he's still a very good reliever. He's getting a little bit expensive. I think that if you're looking to potentially move, you could move him for a legitimate bat in the corners plus pitching, like a high minors pitching prospect, which I just said the Twins have too many of, but I would definitely be open to moving Yohan Duran. If they don't, it's not like I'm like, get this guy out of here. I'm excited to see him in the bullpen, but that's the name that, is on the big league roster that I would be really interested to see what the Twins could get for him.
Duran he's kind of got more like Armando Benitez or like in him than he does. I'm trying to think of like a crazy stable flame throwing reliever, and maybe there just aren't that many, but that kind of like you do ride the wave a little bit with him, and it's not for better or worse necessarily. I mean, technically, I guess it is, but I watched him all year, and then I looked at his stats, and it didn't quite feel like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
And so that's where it's like, but here's the thing too. That's so tough for me. We've talked about the depth of this team. Like you have to identify the spot where you want to get that player. If you are convinced you needed, let's say, a second baseman and Jonathan India was available, like, okay, you've honed in on that. Now I'm thinking like, what position do you look at on the Twins? And you're like, yes, I want one of those because I don't have one of those because like, yeah, you could, if you got a corner outfielder, that's great. You don't have Max Kepler anymore, most certainly. And it's not as though Matt Wallner or Trevor Larnach are guaranteed to be 120 weighted runs created plus bats with average defense, Jason Kubel 2.0 or whatever. But like, I also look at him like, it's so hard for me to be like, yeah, I'm plugging this guy into third and, screw you, Jose Miranda and Royce Lewis. Royce, you can go play second. Oh, shoot, Royce is over there. Now what am I going to do with Brooks Lee? It's hard for me to identify that position too, where I feel crazy strongly about it. So like what Mike Berardino used to tell me, you don't target positions in trades because that's how you make a bad trade. You target a catcher and that's how you end up with John Buck instead of getting the best player in the trade. Now, how do you marry those two philosophies? Not locking in on position, which I also think matters more if you're acquiring Johan Santana than trading him. How do you not lock in on a position, but also internally kind of be like, yes, this is our answer at blank. And when you do those two things, who in your mind's eye is that position or player?
I mean, I think I would slightly disagree with that idea. When there is a clear need, you want to go get somebody to fill that clear need. Yeah. And maybe that isn't like the peak value for the team, but maybe like the most valuable player that you can get in trade actually is worth less on your team. And so I think
it's an opportunity value as opposed to like.
And so, if the best guy, for example, let's just say that they're trading Yohan Duran, the best guy that they're going to get is a top 10 center fielder in baseball. And you've already got Byron Buxton. Like, that's incredibly valuable, but you would potentially take somebody who's a step lower on that because they can fill a position of need. Granted, if you were to get Harris, you would move, him to a corner.
Or Bucks into a corner, yeah.
Right. You'd move one of them to a corner, one of the corner guys to DH, and you'd call it a day. But I do think
you through swimming upstream, yeah.
Right. So I do think that second base is a little bit of an under-discussed position this offseason. There are a lot of names that could be at second base, but none of them are guys that you're super excited or like super confident in, I guess, with the exception of maybe Willie Castro. And if you're talking about Willie Castro being your everyday second baseman, that, subtracts from your bench, and that's probably not what you want to do. But, Brooks Lee did not look great. Julian looked unplayable for most of the year. After that, it's like, you've got Austin Martin and you've got Michael Hellman and you've got Keishel. And so maybe Keishel is like the ace in the hole there. If everything doesn't go well over the first few months, maybe mid-season he's up and he's making a difference.
But it's like the old adage, if you have 5 second basemen, you have none. Actually, it's if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none. But
that was actually literally going to be I'm thinking about writing something on this, and that was going to be, if you have 5 second basemen, you don't have one.
I'm your muse, or you're my muse, or something.
No, man, you stole that from me. I want the record to show that was in my head before you put it there. But first base and DH and corner outfield, like those are, I think, where I would prefer to make an addition.
But it's complicated because those guys are hard to value unless they're a really good defender. Like if you have a Kevin Pillar or Kevin Kiermaier in center versus left, like the value changes drastically.
Yeah.
But if you're relying on a guy who can hit and has some defensive value, like David Peralta at his best, like that's different than going out and getting a guy who you just throw out there because he's, big, blocky, Josh Willingham style. So like, it's so hard for me to wrap my mind around, like, what does that look like where I don't feel like I'm forcing myself to go grab an outfielder like Randall Grichuk just because of the handedness he has and no other reason. Like, again, not that Grichuk wouldn't be a good fit, but if you were to get a younger version of Grichuk for Joan Duran, at some point you're just kind of like, oh, well, what did I do that for? You know what I mean? Like that's what's so hard for me to try project with this offseason is that I don't know the way they're thinking with some of that secondary stuff.
I do think that there is kind of like, there is not a guy right now who's on paper going to fill in your DH spot. Like right now, like that's probably penciled in as like Edward Julian. So like they do need to get another bat into this lineup, onto this roster. And the easiest way to do that is by some plotting first baseman. Yandy Diaz is the name that I've kind of gravitated towards.
I would love to see on the show about 2 weeks ago. Yep.
Yeah. And so, but also if there is some like starting caliber right-handed corner outfielder who could mix in at DH, who could, not be like Randall Grichuk of today, but could be like a legitimate bat against lefties, I would like to see that. I don't think that, you want to make a trade where it's Yohan Duran going out for that guy. But I do think that the position of need right now is just bat that you can put in some sort of corner and move around. Obviously, like I said, I am a little skeptical about their situation at second base, but that's kind of where I'm sitting. I would love to see Yandy Diaz is, again, the name that I keep coming back to, given the contract. He's only making 10 and then it's a $12 million option, but you don't want to just get zeroed in on one dude and be like, oh, this is the guy they have to trade for.
What if you moved Vasquez and a pretty good prospect for Yandy? Because here's the deal. The Rays were in on Travis d'Arnaud. They love the idea of a catcher like that. Now, again, they're probably not going to want to pay that catcher $10 million, and that's why you either soften the blow by taking on some money or tacking on a prospect or some degree of both. But if you could, in theory, have Yandy Diaz, less Christian Vasquez, and then some of the money shakes out where you take, a bit of a hit, I think you could have something there. The Twins, this front office, or at least this half of the front office that remains, has traded with the Rays. I don't think there's any sort of like embargo or anything. I think it could work.
Okay, let's throw this one out. Would you trade? So also Yandy Diaz, if he gets traded, he's owed an extra $1 million by his new team.
Trade
so he's
kicker.
actually he's an $11 million a year guy if you trade for him this year.
Yeah,
so
the free agents you get 15 or 16. Like,
right, of course.
So there is value.
If you were to package Christian Vazquez, you would eat, let's say, $2 million of Christian Vazquez's contract. So he'd be $8 million to the Rays, and you threw in Luke Keeschel and you got Yandy Diaz back for that. You would be down $3 million. You're going because you're retaining 2, and then So would you do that?
I need a lottery ticket Luis Gil type from them, and then I would, I think.
The Calvin Fauché of our own type of thing.
Eddie Moreland went in the trade to Tampa Bay. Byron Churio or Darren Bowen. Yeah, if I could get back a Darren Bowen, don't look at his numbers, by the way. Holy I would need someone I identify as like, hey, maybe there's an ace in the hole in the the Dominican Summer League or low A ball, something like that. Yeah. I'd have to think about it, but because if the price for like someone like Eric Fetty was Keeschel, Eric Fetty moves an entirely different needle for me, and I think that's important to consider too. Now, for me, not to switch gears too rapidly, but for me, it's all of that for someone who would start a playoff game for you. Now, I understand the definition of that is nebulous. To a lot of people, though, they think if you have 5 great starters and a great bullpen, that's the key to winning in the or if you have an ace, first of all, and then 4 great starters behind them, that's what you need to win the World Series. Nobody cares that the fact is, like, the Rangers won with getting like nothing from DeGrom, nothing from Scherzer. Like, you get in and then you just make it happen. You throw arms at everybody. You don't have to have this preset thing. Now, with that said, though, I love Pablo Lopez, love Joe Ryan, love Bailey Ober, but I need one more guy in that mix. Am I aiming too high? Am I aiming too low? I don't know what's fair. Now, if I could have those 3 guys, my acquisition, and then an open audition with I suspect David Festa being the number 5 starter, I would feel really good about this team. Now, have I identified who that starter is? No. I mean, I like guys like Edward Cabrera. Actually, no, it was who was the guy they DFA'd? They non-tendered the big hard thrower that came over from Philly. Oh man,
who are we talking? The Twins
DFA'd? The Marlins had a crazy big prospect that they just DFA'd this last year. But basically what it comes down to is I like identifying a guy with good pitch measurables who, maybe you get a couple more grounders, rein in the walk rate, keep the ball in the ballpark, whatever it is. Sixto Sanchez, by the way.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
Yeah. If you can find the next guy and it's maybe like your 4 coming into the season, but could pitch like a 2, that's kind of where I'm looking. I don't have a name identified. Eric Fetty is in the right price range as far as salary. I think he'd be in the right price range as far as cost to trade for. He's making Chris Paddock money, and if Chris Paddock could go someplace, I don't know. I'm just thinking, like, I need one more starter. I think that the Twins rotation is in a better place than a lot of fans realize. They have 3 top 30 to 40, 50 pitchers. Like, that's somewhere people forget about what it was like 10 years ago when I covered this team in 14 and they had like PJ Walters making starts. Like, it's not like that, and people will have you believe that it is. But I do want one more starter going into next year because I don't want too many innings from rookie starters if I'm going to have to sift through who has it and who doesn't right now, whether it's SWR, Zebby, Festa. Like, I think you could get 2 rotation spots out of that, but I don't want to lean on that as a crutch. I want one more starter who I feel really good about starting on any given day.
Yeah, and I'm of agreement with that. I do think that it is because they have a good top 3 and they do have a lot of options to fill in those last 2 spots. I don't think that it's like a desperate crying need for them.
Right.
But, I just think about last year. I mean, you feel good going into the playoffs with 3, top 30, 40 starters. That every team would feel good about that. But if one of those guys goes down in August, like we just saw happen, all of a sudden you've got 2 top 2 stars. And I mean, even like at the end of 2023, where both Ryan and Ober were pretty ineffective. You don't feel comfortable with them going through a lineup more than one time, and you've just got Gray and Lopez. It is really important to have that fourth guy so that, you can fake. It's really easy to fake a fourth starter in the playoffs. You can do a bullpen game, whatever you want to do. Like, most teams are kind of taking that approach. It's a lot harder if you're only running out two true starters in the playoffs. And so that's another aspect to that I think is important. One of the things that I've been wrestling with is Griffin Jax being a starter. And like my initial thought was, it's a really silly thing. Why are we're doing too much? Griffin Jax is like a top 5 reliever in baseball. But then I started thinking, like, if you had any confidence that Griffin Jax could be like a top 3, like one of the top 3 in this rotation. And I don't know how you would project that out, but if he could be better than Joe Ryan or Bailey Ober, I'd do that in a heartbeat. I just don't know where that line is if you were to flip him over.
Huge there. There's a reason why teams are signing Reynaldo Lopez to a deal where you're like, that doesn't make any sense. And then suddenly he has a great year as a starter and has 2 more reasonable years. Whereas if he ended up being just a decent workhorse middle reliever, throwing 85 innings and giving you a 4.80 ERA, you're like, why are you paying that guy $12 million? And it's like, we tried something. That could be the Twins doing that with some house money in the form of Griffin Jax, and then instead backfilling their bullpen. Because I still think, I know they took Josh Winder. I think they should still bring him back, but I think like they have guys in that like Winder, Hedrick area, that ether where they could create enough decent guys in the back end of the bullpen. I mean, they had Cody Stashak for a year who was pretty solid. I think they can keep cycling out those guys to where you could be okay if Jax is your number 4 starter. Again, I don't know how to project that out. I don't know if it makes any sense. It's worth a shot because, like, Jordan Hicks did it last year. He was okay. Clay Holmes comes up. I don't really know about that one, but teams are always going to look for creative ways to reinvent the wheel pitching wise. And the Twins should at least effort to be in that conversation. And that might be Griffin Jax as a starter.
And I wouldn't be surprised if they cannot find somebody in that mold where you can plug them into your 4th spot, some sort of veteran, some sort of trade. And honestly, like I know that I said earlier that I would say that both Jenkins and Rodriguez are off limits. I could be talked into trading Emmanuel Rodriguez if you're talking about like a legitimate like starter.
I think like Sandy Alcantara for that though. Like
just leading up to the point, I would be willing to flip a lot of prospects if you're talking about like a legitimate playoff starter. So I do think that is something that the Twins are probably working through. If they were to go and get Eric Fedde, I don't think that he's going to be the guy he was last season. No. But if Eric Fedde is your 4 or your 3 or whatever, that's a pretty nice rotation.
It might be just more about who he's not than who he is. He's not a prospect pitching their first time. And an underrated factor, he does have like that Colby Lewis factor where it's stunk in the big leagues, pitched well overseas, learned about himself, learned about what makes it work, what doesn't, comes back. Like, those guys turn into durable number 4s a lot. Colby Lewis was a really good pitcher in this league for quite a while after he came back from overseas. So there is value in that. You'd obviously rather be the team that finds that guy than the team that trades for that guy. But at the end of the day, you can't ask questions for how you got guys. You just have to have those guys.
For sure. So yeah, I could definitely see any of that happening.
I got 2 more questions for you. Could you see a trade where Charlie Soto brings you back something similar to what Chase Petty did? What is that, 3 years ago now?
I mean, Charlie Soto, because Petty had not pitched yet, correct?
So with Charlie, I get like is he going to be Brusdar Graterol, Dylan Betances, or can he be a workhorse? Some of those guys that just have the sturdy build and just they can pitch 180 innings and it's that's not much a thing anymore. I guess I'm kind of getting 2004 pilled, but I just have in my mind like this archetype of what he can be, whether it's a workhorse starter or a really great reliever. He's going to throw the crap out of the ball, but like, can I make that someone else's dilemma and get back? And maybe it's Eric Fedde. I don't know. Is Eric Fedde's not really Sonny Gray from 3 years ago, but he might be in terms of value on this year's market because of the cheapness of his contract. I don't know.
Yeah. So my point, I guess, is kind of there's been like in terms of his numbers, like his measure, like his outcomes did not look awesome this season, his first year. What I was trying to say is, Petty had not thrown yet. And so there was just like dreams. There was only dreams. However, with Soto, you're talking even though his results didn't look great, there was a lot of reason to be really excited about how he actually pitched.
And he was out there.
It's one of those things where it's like, he's probably, I would say, short of Connor Prelip, he's probably the widest variance pitching prospect that the Twins have right now on their farm. He's a reliever. He's going to be a really good reliever if he's healthy.
Yeah.
But I would not be opposed to flipping him for an established mid to front end rotation guy. Like if they were able to pull off a similar deal to what they did for Sonny Gray, I would be all over that. Yeah.
Okay. So my format as we get ready to get out of here is I'm trading prospects. Now there are players that are not on the board, but again, never say never. If someone says you can have Zach Gallen and he'll sign a 5-year deal with you or whatever, you know what I mean? Like never. But my foundation is trade prospects, keep hitters, and make tertiary, I don't know what the word is, additions. So what I'm saying is trade prospects to fill the biggest concerns that you feel are on the team. Now, whether that's pitching, a big bat, I think it's a starting pitcher, and I want to give Austin Martin some more run. I want to see what I can get from Brooks Lee. I want to give those guys opportunities. Jose Miranda, Royce Lewis. I think there's enough offensive talent. The tertiary pieces I'm talking about are like a Yasmani Grandal, an Adam Duvall type to, or maybe basically like a souped up Kyle Garlick.
I am convinced that Ahmed Rosario is a Twin.
Honestly, I can see that because he's dabbled in the outfield too, hasn't he?
Yes. So he's played both corners. He's technically played a little bit of center. He's played first, or no, he's not played first, but he has played second, third, and short, obviously. He hits left-handed pitching. He is fast. I feel like he's a diet Willie Castro that you can platoon. Like it's a perfect match for what Falvey and Rocco love to do. I'm convinced that Ahmed Rosario is going to be a Twin.
Do you know who he reminds me of a little bit? It's another guy who kicked around and was real fast. Jonathan VR.
Yes, absolutely.
Like maybe not similar in terms of like who they hit, who they don't. VR would be like a 3-win player, then a -1 win player, then a 3-win. And like, I don't know if he was bad in the clubhouse or what, because he never seemed to have a long stay anywhere. Like, I don't think he's Milton Bradley or anything, but like you look at the value and you'd be like, that guy was a 2.5-win player and can't seem to stay somewhere. And he plays all over and he steals bases. Like, never quite understood that. And I don't know if Rosario checks any different boxes, but yeah, that's a move I would see. I think if you got Rosario, catcher, we had an entire episode on that people can go back and check out. And, maybe a couple cheap relievers that you could turn into the next Brock Stewart, I don't know if Archie Bradley fits that. I don't know if he's even retired. I just mean some guys who used to be good that you could maybe make good again. That to me is about as good of an offseason as you can have with these constraints. What was your, pull off the Band-Aid, what is your elevator pitch for what you think you would do?
I mean, I'm very much of the same mind. I do think that I'm a little bit less antsy to grab that extra rotation arm. But yeah, I do think that they need some sort of significant bat. It doesn't need to be like an all-star, but a pretty good bat. I would be willing to trade a lot of prospects this offseason. I know that would, hurt them in the farm system rankings, but I think that they need to get like a legitimate bat somewhere in the middle of the order. I think that they should do some tertiary moves like, bringing in a new backup catcher and whatever. You need to make some trades to clear up some roster or some payroll space. If you're able to swing some sort of trade for a starter that you can slot in around Ober and Ryan, I'm all for it. But also, I would also be open to moving Griffin Jacks if you ask me really politely.
The one thing or the things I'm not doing though, like I'm not moving Royce Lewis. I'm not moving Carlos Correa. If you could get him to agree, just to me, there's no upside to that. And
No.
even if Byron Buxton would waive it, like there's no upside there. I'm not moving Pablo Lopez. I am not hitting reset. I'm not hitting reboot. I'm not hitting control delete. I am saying, look, we had a bad year where a lot of things went wrong, but I believe in the talent of this group. I'm going to supplement it. I'm going to be creative, which has been a hallmark of Derek Falvey over his. We're coming up on 8-9 years. He's been 7-8 years. He's been creative. I'm getting creative, but I'm not trading any of my pillars.
Yeah, I'm of the same mind. I don't think there's a little part of me that's a little just over Royce Lewis and has been for a while, but that's just a personal thing. So like there's like the little voice in my head's like, trade Royce Lewis, trade him, he's gone. But no, I don't think that. Honestly, almost any major leaguer on the Twins right now does not have the trade value that would make it a reasonable trade. I don't think that anybody's value is, maybe with the exception of maybe Trevor Larnach and Matt Waller. Yeah, like there are just a handful of guys whose trade values are, something that you would drool over right now. Everybody else just seems to be at least a step or two down from what their max trade value could be.
They're all like ARB1, so guys you're not really that concerned about. So,
right.
Well, hey, we have bantered on plenty long. I've absolutely enjoyed it, been delighted by it. And, it's dangerous what can happen when two like-minded individuals talk about off-season moves.
Oh, that's an insult, I think. I don't know if it's an insult for me or for you.
Take it as you will. Hey, he's Gregg Masterson. You should follow him on the tweets and the skeets at Gregg Masterson. I'm Brandon Moore, and I wouldn't recommend following me. But why don't you play us out? We'll do what, Mr. Masterson?
Casilla tomorrow night.
You get the whole thing.
There we go.
Hey.